Our next topic on Let It Rip is spurred by a couple of recent stories, including that of 12-year-old Charlie Bothell. He's the boy who went missing for nearly 2 weeks, only to be found alive and well in the basement of his family's home. Now, during the course of the investigation, police have said that Charlie's parents were extremely strict. And as part of his punishment for not doing what he was told, he was disciplined. Court documents show that the boy was punched by his stepmother. He told police that his father beat him with a plastic pipe, but he did it when he didn't complete his assignments or his exercise routine. The defense attorney for the parents happens to say that this was corporal punishment and not child abuse. And then there's a case of the teenagers accused of beating Stephen Utash. Now, of course, you know he's the driver who stopped to help a little boy accidentally hit by his truck. During the sentencing for the last defendant, the judge told 19-year-old Latrez Cummings that a firm hand might have kept him out of trouble.
That's what you have needed in your life as a father. Someone to discipline you. Someone to beat the hell out of you when you made a mistake, as opposed to allowing you or encouraging you to do it to somebody else.
Cummings got 3 years probation with the first 6 months to be served in jail. Time to let it rip. Back with us tonight, Sabrina Jackson, author of the book 12 Laws for Single Mothers Raising Black Males. Now, she believes that physical punishment is sometimes necessary to correct a child's bad behavior. Also with us, 2 judges. Judge Jody Debrecht-Switowski has 20 years of experience deciding cases involving children and families in Waterford. And Wayne County Judge Vonda Evans has presided over trials ranging from child abuse to murder. Both of them are deeply concerned about children. And so is Chico Sorrell, a Detroit public school teacher for 24 years who says he can tell the difference between students whose parents were tough and those who weren't. And of course, you all know Charlie, so let's get right to it. Sabrina, are you telling me that you beat your son when he was a child?
I never said that I beat him, but I did spank him, and I did put my hands on him because that was a part of the disciplinary practices in my house.
How much did you have to do that?
I did not have to do it often, because the other thing about parenting is that you need to have an arsenal of techniques to use with your children. Spanking should not be the only thing that you use. I used time out from time to time. I took away things from time to time. So it depended on what he did, determined the punishment.
Your child is now what, 20?
He's 21.
And I am sure an upstanding young man, but I also know that as a single mother, as your child grew, he eventually probably grew bigger than you.
Yes, he did grow bigger than me, but I remember specifically there was a time that he was challenged with playing with fire. And I did a lot of different things, but the thing that made the difference was his cousin named Corey. Big black man. Put his hands on him, never had problems with fire again.
But Judge Switowski, what is the line? What is the difference between discipline and child abuse?
Well, the jury's determined what the difference is. The law says that it has to be reasonable, and that the discipline is reasonable. In every household, just like individualized sentencing, there's individual reasonableness, and that's determined by everyone. It's determined by the situation. It's determined by what act you used. Did you spank the child with an open hand? Did you spank the child with a cutting board? Did you spank the child with a pipe? You know, did you hit the child across the face? Did you leave marks? Where did you leave the marks? You know, how long did the marks last? You know, there's some fine lines. Did you scald the child? You know, in my practice, did you put a gun in your child's face? You know, I've certainly seen the gamut of things, and so, you know, it really is what is reasonable. And I can tell you that juries give a lot of latitude to parents as to what is reasonable in their home.
Judge Evans, we heard one Detroit judge telling the teenager convicted convicted of beating Stephen Utash, your colleague,
yes,
say to that young man that
okay,
if he had a father in his life who beat him for doing wrong, he wouldn't have been going to prison or jail or before the court for beating Stephen Utash. But I have heard some psychologists say that violence begets violence.
Well, quite frankly, I disagree. When we see all the young men, especially from the city of Detroit, which are predominantly, we see a lot of them, 90% of the young men that come before me do not have active fathers in their home. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the doctor here, but I believe that it's almost impossible for a woman to train a man to be a man. Now, you can train a child, but you cannot teach a man to be a man. And I do believe that you have to do the best that you can, but so many times because these fathers are absent in the homes, the mothers cripple through love, and then they become enablers themselves. So yes, discipline is necessary, because at some point in time you have to get your children's attention, and begging and pleading is not going to cut it. I know it didn't work for me, and it sure is not working for my children.
Were you spanked as a child?
Oh, yes, I was, with anything that they could, and both my parents were teachers.
Well, which one of us wasn't spanked as a child? I bet that every single person on this panel was spanked as a child. No, I mean, I certainly wasn't, because I never did anything wrong.
Yeah.
The continuum swings constantly in society, as to what is acceptable, and discipline, corporal punishment is no different.
Well, we have a teacher right here who says he can tell a student who lives in a house where there is a firm hand versus a student who does not. How? How do you know?
Well, usually the kid that is performing well in your class, that is behaving well in your class, is usually brought up correctly.
Now, what do you mean when you say correctly?
Meaning that really you could tell that the parent spent time with that child. Instead of hitting the child, maybe the parent was, speaking with the child a lot, counseling the child, taking the child to places, doing things with the child, instead of just beating the child all the time. I mean, in Detroit, we have a lot of kids that are doing some tough things, some bad things, and in DPS we do too. That's where I work. But a lot of that is just because I believe that the kids are accustomed to violence, really. Well, and a lot of that is at home.
Judge Jody, you mentioned the continuum. When Charlie, you and I were children, it was appropriate for our fathers to discipline us with a hand whenever we misbehaved. I don't think we did that with our kids.
Well, yeah,
certainly not to the extent that our fathers did it with us.
Well, I remember my father with a belt too, and he knows it. And I think I turned out okay. I think you need discipline. Maybe arguing that.
But does discipline mean a belt?
Yes, it does. It could in the right circumstances.
But we're talking about not bruising, breaking legs, etc. Discipline is.
But a belt is going to leave a bruise. It's going to leave some marks. It's going to leave some welts.
I think this we've become too politically correct in this discipline these days.
Well, let me say this about violence begetting violence.
Yes.
Because there's a difference between a parent disciplining a child. My child never feels like he's on the same stage as me. He's not my equal.
That's
so
right.
he doesn't even think that he can do what I do with his equal, because he doesn't see me and my equal being violent. I'm not violent with my equal. I am disciplining my child because he is not my equal. And as a parent, that is the reason why God made parents, because I have the control in my home, and never did I want him to think that he had the control.
Well, you know what? Let me just say this.
Discipline with anger.
Let me just say this to you. I tell my children every day, we live in a democracy, but I'm the queen up in here.
Hello.
Okay? Hello. We don't have locks on doors. Okay, we don't have none of that.
I have 3 sons.
Brittany is right. There's a hierarchy for a reason.
In the family.
I have 3 sons.
Yes.
I don't remember beating them at all, whipping them at all.
Exactly.
And I've never had a problem with them.
Exactly.
Ever. Excuse me?
Two-parent home?
Yes.
All right, so you have an intact family here, all right? And we're looking at some very different families in the Metro Detroit area.
I'm divorced now. I'm
just saying, but you live in the suburbs too. Your kids live in the suburbs.
My kids were raised in Detroit. My kids were raised in Detroit, and then the latter part of their life, they lived in. But it doesn't matter anyway.
No, I do think that parent is tired. They are working. They are coming home. They're trying to do the best they can for their kid in so many different ways. One thing we can never do, just piggybacking on what you said, Sabrina, is you never discipline out of anger.
You never do.
Never discipline out of anger. And that's a mistake that we see when we have some parents that are tired and they're exhausted and they grab and they go. And listen,
but you don't have to beat the kid anyway, though.
No, well, I don't know if you have to beat your kid or not.
Maybe you don't have to beat your kid.
No, I don't.
Okay. Maybe you don't have to beat your kid.
But you know what? But you know what? My ex-wife and I.
Their kids is a bad parent.
Right.
Wait a minute.
Let me say this. There is a difference between beating and spanking
discipline.
Okay.
and discipline. Let me
Okay.
say that first.
Well-
And second of all, that's why each individual in their own home has the right to discipline how they choose, because the law, the Child Protection Law of 1975, does not say you cannot hit
Others
your
does.
Sometimes
child.
these kids, though, they know the law, and they're going to go get their parents back. And I've seen this.
But-
where they,
You've handled
no,
this.
they turn the tables on the parents.
They
say,
do.
know
If
what?
you hit me, I'm going to
Oh,
report
that's right.
you
If
to the
you-
court.
I'm gonna
And then here's
report
the
you.
response.
That's
And when
disaster.
your
Here's the
child
response.
does that, you give them the cell phone
Well,
and you
no,
dial
you say,
911
yeah,
for
you
them,
better
okay?
We need the police in our
Okay,
lives.
you
for-
dial
for-
You better
911
get to the
for them.
phone first.
Now, I was not such a great child. I got in my share of trouble, but I was pretty good. My father rarely spanked me, only twice in my entire life. My father led by example.
Yeah,
That's
it.
I wanted
That's
to
it.
be like him.
That's right.
He didn't have to hit me. Simply a
That's right.
look
That's
was
right.
all it took.
Okay, but
and it
that's
wasn't
That's
It
right.
was a
That's
lot
right.
different
Yes.
then.
No,
Fuel,
no,
okay?
it works
was a
today
lot
too.
different.
But
let me
it works.
say
That
this.
works today too.
Let me say this.
No, that works
Let me
today
say
too.
this.
You knew to get home
Let-
with that
let me
street.
jump
No,
in.
that works today too.
Let me
All you
jump
have
in.
is animosity
All
towards your
right,
father.
wait,
one
let
at
me
a time.
say
One
it.
at a one at a time.
Discipline.
One at a
Let
time.
me
That's
jump
right,
in.
but we need love.
Don't
What
take
is
out your belt.
really
Don't-
important
One at a time.
because you have different types of people. First of all people are different. And so in my household that I grew up in, my parents didn't have to do the same thing to me that they did to my brother or to my youngest brother. So as a parent, you have to know the children that you're dealing with, and what works for one may not work
but
for
you're
another.
raising them.
Now,
Well,
but it's not about just you raising them. You come with a certain set of characteristics and temperament style.
That's
so
all right.
as a temperament style, if I'm the type of person who I am compassionate and I am that type of child, then yeah, how you discipline me is different. But if I'm a rebel rouser and I'm gonna do what I want to do, don't matter what you say, then
So-
your type of discipline is
So
going
spanking
Judge
them
Jones.
will change it.
Judge
Yeah,
Jones.
that's some very important things.
Okay.
And when you look at all the studies and things like that, there's two very important things about raising kids. One is secure attachment and temperament, which Sabrina has talked about a little bit, and those are very important. And you were there for your kids, and you were putting them to bed at night, and you were reading to them, and you were reinforcing these attachment things. So they didn't have to flounder and try it on their own. Not only that, discipline, as opposed to punishment, corporal punishment, things of that nature, is a conscious process. Emphasis on the word process. So the event happens, there needs to be a follow-up. There needs to be a little bit of a conversation before the event, whatever you choose that event to be, whether, and then you need to follow up with your child.
Well, that's
This is
wonderful.
why
That's fairy tale. That's fairy tale.
Okay.
I mean, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
I'm stressed all the time. I'm stressed from the time I wake up till I go to bed.
I
So when I
understand.
ever get to my kids.
Oh, look, more to come, guys. Let It Rip is going to continue, and this time we're going on the road with Charlie. Stay with us.